again. Now just trying, oh, to deny the fact that there's never less to you. I played the game but lost the bet. I don't wanna love again. Yeah, I don't wanna love again. Cause I don't want nobody to change me now. Cause I like to be myself. If you're not agree, you can walk away. You can walk away. You can walk away. Something in my mind makes me think I ain't nobody perfect. Something in my mind makes me think I ain't nobody perfect. Something in my mind makes me think I ain't nobody perfect. Something in my mind makes me think I ain't nobody perfect. Ain't nobody perfect. Ain't nobody perfect. Ain't nobody perfect. Ain't nobody perfect.
Picking up the pieces that I lost in the lobby. I put you against the wall, you had us body to body. I can't help the way you make me feel, it's so hard to copy. Let's find common ground, meet me in a lost and found, yeah. Dark days turning into dark nights. I hit the strip and spend it all, I'm having hard times. That reminiscing had me looking through the archives. I seen a picture of you looking like a star shines. And you're bright, 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 like the lights on a fight night, night. Love hit me like a mic, mic, mic. You know I'ma get it right, right, right. So stay with me, run away with me. Need like a dope fiend, need dope. Need like a coke fiend, need coke. Even though your heart cold, ski slope. I really hope the song bringing me close.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing today? It is Monday, so we are doing some more hacking practice. Just adjusting the levels, making sure everything is all right. I think I can hear okay. Got the mic up a little louder than I normally do because I've been checking out the stream a little bit in the VODs and still pretty quiet, which is ultimately a result of me not speaking directly into the microphone at all times because of the position of my face. But if I turn up the gain, maybe it'll be all right. But then I get a lot of noise in my headphones because the low level noise pickup is I have a filter on that, but it's only happening in OBS, which is after my headphones. I'm like plugged into the monitor or whatever, so I can get the audio immediately and I don't get a weird delay through OBS or anything. But then I don't have the filter on my headphones, but it looks like I can turn down my headphones quite a bit and still, yeah. So I'm just turning down the monitor and I can still talk at a reasonably like decent volume. Okay, so as I said, it's Monday, so we're doing hacking practice, binary exploitation stuff, continuing with the nightmare course. We are here in the course, almost halfway through the ROP section. Hey, Linus didn't make Linux. How's it going today? Just switched back to the chat so I can actually see people saying stuff. And we've gotten through a good portion, but we're probably still only like 2/3, maybe, or sorry, 1/3, maybe 40% of the way through the whole series. But I'm trying not to think about the fact that it's got so many entries in it. You are studying math for tomorrow's exam. Was the day depressing because of the studying or for other reasons? I was never any good at studying or school in general, to be honest. I mean, the stuff was interesting and fun to learn about, but yeah, because of the studying, yeah, it's always difficult to make myself, or was difficult to make myself study. I mean, at this point, I've moved into a mode of life where I'm just not going to do that, I think. I'm not sure if that's, it's one of those, like, obviously I'm not enrolled in school, but like I could be. I could go to a university. But I'm thinking, like, is it where I'm at in my life just as an adult, having lived this long, that I've come to the conclusion that I'm not going to try to put myself through the experience of going to school again and doing all that because I was not any good at it the first time, and I don't think my personality has changed so dramatically that I would be okay at it now. Or if it's, just, well, I'm not actually in school, so I don't know. But yeah, I think my particular personality and the fact that, I don't know, maybe my parents weren't particularly overbearing or disciplinary or whatever. If there was a test and I hadn't studied for it, I was just like, all right, then I will do bad on the test. Which is weird. It always like weirded out my teachers because I would be interested in class. I would be there and listen and ask questions, and I liked learning this stuff, generally speaking. I mean, I liked learning computer stuff more than most of the other topics, but if somebody's going to be like, hey, we're going to talk about math today, or we're going to talk about some history topic or whatever, or biology, or, various things, like I'm down to like try to understand more stuff. But then when it comes to like doing well with that knowledge on a test, I just didn't give a shit. And so they would always get upset with me or confused, like, why do you do so poorly on these tests when you seem to be engaged? I guess the same question of, why don't you do your homework? Because that part of it seemed dumb. It's, the tests aren't particularly realistic. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a certain personality type, basically. And it just sucks when you're in that situation as a child. You don't have the freedom to decide for yourself whether you are going to go along with that. And additionally, there's so much social pressure around the idea that if you don't go along with that, that implies negative things about you. It either means you're lazy or you're not as intelligent or whatever. The whole school system, at least in America, with its high emphasis on standardized testing stuff, it really just selects for people that are really good at following rules and are really happy to follow a bunch of rules so they can get a little gold star and then feel good that they followed the rules really well. And it's designed to tell those people that they're actually really smart for following the rules. But other people who don't really see the value in that, I guess if you want to be very charitable, you can just say they're different kinds of intelligence. But I personally don't have I don't think the rule follower people are bad, like morally bad or just not good people or anything, but they shouldn't they don't need to be given this smugness around their own sense of self-worth because they're willing to follow the rules. But it's all, socially speaking, that plays well into keeping the society as it is, because those people get elevated. The people that tend to do well in those things then go on to the more elite universities where they follow the rules really well there and don't question too hard the realities of our society, and then go on to positions of power because of the relationships that they form, which are in large, in no small part at least, dependent on their continuing to follow the rules. And even as they slowly, because I think it would be hard to get to, a position of like some amount of power in politics and not realize that all the shit that you've been taught is kind of bullshit. But they sort of are so invested in the rule following that they're just going to go with like, well, this must be the right way to do it. This must be how it has to go. Because to accept that actually what they've been doing is following the wrong path for their entire life and just not really exercising any question about it, and possibly feeling like anybody that did was actually stupid for doing that, or just naive and like Pollyanna or whatever. Like, basically, I think psychically it would be very difficult to get into that position and then realize and then have that break from everything that your life has been building to. This idea of like I think about the kids that, and I mean, again, this is like America centric because I have no idea if this applies in other countries. But there's definitely the kids in the middle school and high school age that are like, I'm gunning to be president of the United States at some point in my life. I've got that on my to-do list. It's just, my plan is 8,000 points long for how I'm going to get to that point in my life or whatever. Or I'm going to be, the head of this or that organization. Or like, it's fucking too much, man. Okay, so, it sucks that you got to study for that stuff. And it also sucks that, like, if you don't play along, there's serious consequences for how difficult your life is going to be as a result. I'm very lucky, I think, to have been able to skirt through not actually playing along with that very well. Like, I dropped out of high school twice, and still managed to get a high school diploma through. I was homeless as a young man for some time, and there was a program to help homeless kids sort of go in, finish their school requirements at very minimal time investment, because like I had a full-time job. I had to go work at Subway all day. So then I would go after school, or after work rather, and go to school for, not a very difficult set of courses, and technically earn my diploma out of that. Okay, cool. Yeah, so kind of the same situation. So, I mean, obviously I'm very lucky to have gone through all of that and still be in a position to have the career path that I've had thus far. I don't think you need a diploma for a web dev career. I'm not the best person to give advice around getting a job. I've been very I've basically never gotten a job through the traditional apply and do tech interviews kind of approach. I can do a quick recap of my careers. I went through, I worked at food service jobs, which don't require anything. So you basically just apply, and if you're like me as a white dude was raised, by people who put a lot of emphasis on reading and intelligence or whatever, you come across as somebody who's trustworthy enough to work there and not start just stealing everything. So that's basically the minimum, and probably you'll show up. So that's kind of the bare minimum that they're looking for in those kinds of jobs. Joke on them, though, I didn't show up quite a bit. But then after not showing up one too many times, I was jobless and needed anything at all. So I agreed to work at this computer repair store and said I would write a ticket management system for them. I would do some software development for them for minimum wage. So that was what I was doing. And then some friends of mine pushed me to apply to work as a customer service person on a video game, which paid more than minimum wage. So it was good idea. I just had to be pushed into it because I had been at the computer place for 6 months, and I felt like, oh, this is too short of a time for me to just leave. But honestly, it doesn't matter, especially in a job like that. So I went ahead and started working there. It was pretty easy to get that job because I'm so enthusiastic about video games and game development that they're like, yeah, we want somebody that cares, basically. And so I worked there as customer service, answering emails, and it was like an online game, so I'd have to go in and interact with the customers in the game sometimes. And basically I got super lucky because that company had a very sort of open environment, let's say. I think there's a lot of game companies where the customer service staff would not be even in the same building, or at least not on the same floor, and probably would have no real interaction with the rest of the development team, because there's a lot of hierarchical bullshit like that, where they'll just hire a bunch of people through a temp agency or something and have them work customer service, but not even in the same building. But in this case, it was it was a very small company, so everybody was in the same office together. I was interacting with the other developers all the time, and I was just like, hey, there's a bug that these people have been reporting to us a bunch. I'm really curious, could I look at the code and see if I could figure it out? And I had done enough coding on my own since middle school and high school and stuff to be able to read the C++ code and figure out what the bug was, basically, and write a solution to it. And then I submitted that, and the developers were like, oh shit, this guy actually knows how to program. We should not have him working customer service. They were very supportive of me, basically. And so eventually I got into as an actual programmer on that team. And from there, it's been like I've been doing, that was my sort of entry into now I can have something on my resume that says that I know how to program. Because even though obviously I had that experience, there was no mechanism. There was nothing I could put on my resume to say, hey, I know how to program. And I don't really have the self confidence to just go into an interview and be like, I know I can't point to anything, but believe me when I say I know how to program the stuff or whatever, right? So that was the real changing point for me, and it's just pure luck basically that the place that I ended up was such a welcoming environment for somebody that wanted to expand their career basically. I don't think that would be the case in a lot of places, and there's obviously a lot of privilege and luck around my whole life, and being a white dude and all of that has made a lot of this easier to get away with basically. But then and next time I ended up getting employed at a place was like a coding boot camp, and I was just working there as a volunteer because it was a nonprofit coding boot camp, and I thought it was really cool, and I wanted to help out and like share the programming knowledge that I had, because I remember doing that. I took a couple like community college courses way back when I was still working like food service and wanted to just trying to figure out how can I get a career. Let me do some stuff at community college. Didn't work out very well, other than I did fine in my computer courses, but they always require you to do all these other courses like English stuff, and I just didn't put the effort in to like complete those basically. But when I was doing the computer courses, I was obviously like more advanced than these 101 classes, and so I would help out the other students because it was a lot of fun to just share what I knew and help them understand it. So I thought, oh, wouldn't it be really nice to do that for some other people, just on a volunteer basis? Like they wanted people to come in and try to help the students learn the stuff when they're doing their like, basically it's very lab oriented. So it always is nice to have somebody to help you understand it. And I did that enough, and the students were so appreciative that they sort of were pushing for me to get hired as a full-time staff there. And that's sort of how they were like, hey, we're hiring somebody, do you want to apply? So I wrote a thing like that was technically an application that I did, and with the cover letter or whatever and all that, but it was a very like I was on the short list already kind of situation, and they knew me very well. I wasn't the only person applying for it, obviously, but it was, there was almost no technical, like I didn't have to go and prove that I knew how to program, because I'd been helping these students enough with their programming that whatever my knowledge was, it was enough for the school purposes at least. I did have to sort of do a example demonstration of like lecturing something. So there was a little bit of proving myself through that, but it's so informal and just not the same as if I wanted to go get a job and let me send in my resume and then go do a series of interviews. And like, I've basically still never done that, and I am quite scared of doing that still. So I don't know. I'm not the one to give advice on the particulars of how to get the job. But what I can say is you definitely don't need the diploma and stuff. I mean, if that's like, if that works for you, if that's something that you want to do, like I'm not telling you don't do it either, but I think display the passion that you have. Yeah, if you really like programming, if that's something that you think about on, in your own time, not just within the context of like, is this a career? Then I think if you can convey the fact that you have that passion, that can go a long way to making up for not having some particular entry line on your resume. Right. So if you have it as a hobby, like you have this internal motivation to do it. It's just interesting and fun to you to work on it, even as it's frustrating as well. But still, like you have a drive to do that. I think it's not every place that's going to be able to recognize that, but there's definitely places out there with folks who would interview you who would have a recognition of what the value of that is and why that value is probably more like why that indicator is more reliable for you being a solid employee or a solid person to hire than just I went to school for this. Sometimes, going to school for it isn't a bad sign, but it's also like there's a lot of people who don't have that passion who would go to school for it because it's a decent career, and that's no knock on them. Like I don't want to make it a gatekeeping thing of like you need to have passion to do this job, but like people that care a lot are probably gonna have better results because this is, for all the unfortunate ways in which it can suck because it's in the context of doing a job and work in general sucks. Programming is still an art, essentially. It requires significant creativity and being able to apply your passion to any sort of art and creative outlet is like is going to ensure a better outcome, basically. It doesn't mean that you couldn't, somebody who doesn't care as much couldn't go through and create usable software. Obviously, that happens all the time. But I don't know. I think what I'm just trying to say is like, if you can lean into your passion, and obviously the ideal for that is if you have some kind of project that you can point to as like, I worked on this on my own outside of, didn't have a job. I wasn't working on it for money. That's always ideal, but it's not. I would also say, don't feel like you have to have that in order to apply. Because I think I worked under that mindset for a long time of like, I'm not going to apply to jobs because I don't have some tangible like portfolio basically to say here's what I've done that makes me worth hiring. And that can be trying to have that can be your own kind of gatekeeping. Like, I mean, it sort of depends on your personality. If you have stuff that you're like, this is stuff I worked on and I want to show it off and I'm happy with it, then great. But I was never happy with the stuff that I built. I was always like, okay, I made this thing, but I don't think that this would be impressive enough to mention it to people or anything. So it's, it depends on the particulars of your mindset. If you do have these things that you've made and you're like, yeah, I do want to show this off and show that I can do this, then perfect. You'll be in a position to have that portfolio. And yeah, like Free Boot Camp, which I think I've seen stuff from them quite a bit. I definitely have gotten more into, seeing these resources and stuff and reviewing them since I worked at the boot camp and trying to like assess how other people teach stuff. They mostly do JavaScript, if I recall. Looks like it. Yeah. So if you go through that and you have a portfolio out of that, I would say excellent. Try to put your own spin on it as well. I think the portfolio that is like, here are the class projects that I did, and going through a 300-day course through Free Boot Camp is the equivalent of like going to a class, right? And so if there are specific projects that they have you do during that class that are designed by the people that made the course, then those things in your portfolio, not bad. Like, I wouldn't say don't put them in your portfolio, but if they're the only things in your portfolio, it's not speaking as much to your passion as it is speaking to, I went through the course. And so you want to supplement or otherwise modify those projects. This is assuming they have like specific things. But otherwise, like, you want something in your portfolio that's like, I care about this thing. This was something that I thought was interesting and wanted to do. Because that then speaks a lot more to your passion and your willingness to work on something that isn't just a challenge that was set forth in front of you. Granted, that is more difficult. But that's sort of like at the boot camp that I taught at, we had a bunch of class projects, and a couple of them were like maybe worth having in a portfolio just for their scale. But then there was a whole month-long, we called it a capstone project, where the students would come up with their own project idea, and we would sort of work with them and vet it and help them pare down the requirements and stuff to make it reasonable to work on in the single month that they had to do it. But it was at their direction what they were trying to do. And we had a whole huge variety of stuff. Like, we taught a very straight down the line web development kind of thing, but then we had students who are like, I ride horses all the time, so I want to make a little device, or I guess it was, maybe it paired with the phone, maybe it was just on the phone, but it was using like a gyroscope to track the up and down movement of the horse so that you could figure out when the horse was in like a trot and a canter and a gallop and stuff based on the speed at which it was going up and down, and maybe the height of the difference in the amplitude of that movement. And just sort of like getting some analysis results from that, right? And that was like, we didn't teach anything that would help you do that in our, like, that was purely their idea and required them to learn a lot more stuff in that month than the stuff that we had taught, which was primarily making websites. So that sort of thing, goes above and beyond, and that's like one of the much better projects. I don't want to like put that out there as like that's a baseline or anything, but if you have those ideas, then focus on those. Focus on the ones that are your own derived ideas rather than the ones that are set forth by the boot camp. If you don't have something that you're like an idea that you really want to run with, that's also fine. Because for me, at least, I have long periods of time where I'm like, nothing sounds like a good project right now, and I'm just stuck, and I can't make myself feel excited about anything. And then other times I'm like, yeah, I want to make an x86 instruction decoder. That sounds like, or not even like, I don't have that level of excitement usually, but it's more like, oh, every day for the past week I've been thinking about an x86 decoder and how I could do this or that, or some, it's not, I mean, the thoughts that I have aren't particularly important because I don't know any of the details of this program before I've started writing it, but I have ideas of like, well, maybe I could do some weird fancy stuff to make it really fast, or, like some general purpose ideas. But the fact that I keep thinking about it is the indicator that I have some passion there for trying that project out. Think of small projects for now, just fun projects with JavaScript, like making a web noting app or stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, like, this is probably more towards the end of that 300-day course kind of advice. When you have been doing small projects in JavaScript for a number of months, it's hard to put a time on it because it really depends on how much time you are spending on any given day or on a weekly basis. But once you've sort of gotten in the rhythm of like working on JavaScript projects, then you might have more inspiration for specific stuff, and two, you can start to really push yourself to do something that doesn't necessarily have a well-defined path to how do you complete the project. But in the lead up to that, I think working on small stuff that is like, I think a web note-taking app, is a great kind of small project to do. And I'm sure that if you look around, whether it's on Free Bootcamp or somewhere else, there's like advice on how to do that. So if you get stuck and you aren't sure, like, how would I structure this? How would I build this thing? You can look around at examples and get some inspiration from that. Whereas, yeah, so if you have the vision, I mean, I think you're in a good spot, right? Just keep working on those skills and I guess keep applying to jobs. Yeah. Again, on the job front, like, I think probably the best advice I can give is the advice that I don't normally take myself, because I'm so bad at that. So if it's the thing that I'm not doing, it's probably the right thing to do. And what I've heard from a lot of people is just apply as much as possible, because like you'll either get an interview or you won't. And then if you have an interview, they'll either hire you or not, but like it doesn't stop you from applying to other jobs and applying maybe to the same job a while later, like 6 months later, a year later or something. Yeah, I mean, but that mindset, right? I don't expect to get a job right now. I'm still not ready, but in 1 or 2 years, if I keep working hard and learning, I'd have the right knowledge for a job. I can't tell you that that is true or not true right now, because I don't really know what your experience level is. But what I can tell you is that that is the mindset that I have. That is the thought pattern that I have the way I phrase it to myself is I have been learning programming at this point for over 20 years. And I still tell myself, oh, I'm not quite ready to get a job. I'm not quite ready to go apply for the job that I want. So just be very aware that you can take that mindset and use it to hold yourself back. But it's, I'm not telling you that that's what you're doing, because again, I don't know what your position is. So if you are like self-aware enough that you're like, that's definitely not how I operate, then cool, ignore this advice. But if you're not sure, give yourself a deadline. If you're 6 months from now and you still feel like, oh, I'm like still 1 to 2 years away from being ready, then maybe you're in that mindset of like, there's always a level at which I assume I can get to where I will feel ready. Because that's my mental pattern that I need to overcome, is like, I keep thinking I'll get to a point where I'll feel ready. And the reality is I just won't ever feel ready for the job that I have. I didn't feel ready for any of the jobs that I had in the past. Even though I did them, it somehow worked out. But I never felt like I was actually prepared and qualified for that job. It's like the imposter syndrome thing. And so just over time, you need to like be mentally, self-aware, cognizant of like, oh, my brain doesn't work properly in that assessment of myself. I will always think I am not qualified for a job, even though on the times when I have like taken a risk, it's never not worked out, basically. I mean, I haven't gotten every job I've ever applied to. And that includes the scenario of the fact that I've like basically the jobs that I have gotten were not even really through the standard application process. There are other jobs that I have applied to and did not get. And it still is like, I don't know. I just, this is partly for me, but also if you feel like you have a similar kind of situation to me, and I feel like we have some similarities in how our paths have worked out with the school situation and all of that. Like, if I can give you some advice to not take so long to get to where I am at in my bare minimum level of self-awareness, I think that would be a good thing, because I think I wasted a lot of time feeling like oh, I can't do this for real, like in a real job scenario, because I can just always imagine that the job involves something that I don't know how to do and can't figure out. Or I can imagine that the people that are working at that job are way smarter than me and way more knowledgeable and blah, blah, blah. They went to university and blah, blah, blah. Like, but that's all just, nonsense in my head. I've never worked at a job and like one of these programming jobs and had folks be like, oh, this guy is not up to it or whatever. And like, where it was clear from the situation that I was not actually capable of doing the job that I was in. But the reality is, if I was in a job that I was not capable of doing, that would at worst be confirmation of what my brain thinks by default. In which case, okay, then they'll fire me or something and I'll get a different job, I guess. I think that too, but you just need to try and get the experience. You'll find that it's false. Yeah, basically. I mean, that's sort of the, like, as I said, the base level, bare minimum kind of self-awareness is just an awareness that on these particular aspects of like self-assessment as to or prediction of how the future is going to go, like, predicting that if I were to work at that job, I wouldn't be able to do it. People wouldn't think I was up to it. People wouldn't like me, et cetera, or assessing my own capabilities. The self-awareness to realize that my brain is incapable of doing those thought patterns properly, that it simply makes the wrong conclusions and I should not trust it. Of course, knowing that and having that self-awareness, like, the difficulty is having that all the time, because it's when my brain reaches those conclusions, it's not me convincing myself, that's just me having those thoughts, and so I'm already convinced, so to speak. So it's a second layer of like that needs to kick in and say, hey, that thought that you just had and belief that you were just believing is not real, or whatever, is not worth believing. Because if I don't do that, then I will just keep thinking those thoughts. That's my default mode, which I think, I haven't really spoken about it on the stream, but like, I definitely have been diagnosed with ADHD, and I do believe that is a significant component of all of this. That it sounds like it's a relatively common thing for people with ADHD, and on the very short period of time where I was taking medication for it, a lot of these things were, if not completely gone, they were definitely different. All of these like weird mental thought process issues sort of were impacted by the use of the medication for ADHD, but it felt like it was too much of a change, and so I didn't keep up with it. But it's one of those things, I think, when I get back to the United States, granted, healthcare in the United States is so terrible that I don't know how I would get access to somebody who could prescribe me proper medication. But it's arguably even harder out here where I don't even speak the language, even though it might be cheaper if I did go for it here. But I don't know how I would. I'm just praying that I don't have to interact with the healthcare system here, because I don't speak any Thai, so I don't know. It would be a difficult situation. But yeah, it's one of those, like, I should probably try to address that neurological imbalance or whatever more when I get back, and maybe that will help alleviate, and I don't have to like fail so much at reining in my bad mental thought processes, and maybe then I'll like apply to jobs. I don't know. I spent all of last year not applying to jobs and just working on personal projects and learning programming stuff, which is, my sort of default mode of like, just keep getting better at programming and maybe it will magically work out for itself. It did before, but I, probably shouldn't rely on that is going to happen again. So you still do any only job or work or not for now? So like technically I'm here as a student in Thailand, a self-defense class, and this is like basically I haven't had a job for a year and a half since roughly the beginning of 2019. And towards the end of 2019, I was like, okay, I've been without a job for a year and I haven't even applied to anywhere because, again, I'm very scared of going through the interview process and being judged not adequate, I guess, or having to prove myself and being unable to. So I didn't see myself being in a position to just suddenly flip that switch and start applying to jobs and have everything, fall into place. So I decided if I'm going to keep on this path of like, let me keep learning more stuff before I feel like I am ready, or more realistically, just get to a point where I don't have any other options, I'm going to have to get a job. I can at least do that a little longer and a little more easily in a country like Thailand where it's just cheaper to live. So the rent and the food and all of that is just a lot cheaper here. So I can do this for another year rather than, I don't know, 3 months maybe if I were still back in the US. If I didn't move to somewhere really, like, I don't know, maybe if I moved to Detroit in the United States, it's very cheap to live there as well, but it's still, the possibilities for existing without an income out there is a much shorter timeline. So I decided to give myself a longer timeline to work on stuff. But on some level, that's just pushing the problem off, I guess. Just sort of kicking the can down the road. I don't know what the metaphor is. Because I'm still not going to feel ready to do stuff when I get back. I'm not going to feel like, oh, now I can definitely apply to some kind of job making use of this vulnerability research, exploitation, development skills that I have. But I'll probably just need to do it or fall back to, I'll apply to programming jobs and try to feel like I can prove my abilities there. Do I do any freelancing? Yeah, I've done some stuff, like some reverse engineering work, and mostly been focusing on reverse engineering and paired with a little bit of software development kind of stuff, like some folks that run small video games or like emulators or MUDs and stuff, doing work for them because I feel like I don't know. I can be very picky about where I want to work just because of having, I don't know, a very anti-capitalist standpoint, and there's so much in the tech industry where it's just like, we're making the world a better place by doing X, Y, and Z, and I think that is not at all making the world a better place. I don't want to contribute to that. But somebody making a video game or whatever and like doing a little trying to get by as an independent game developer, like, I'm happy to help them out. That seems like a perfectly morally okay cause, so to speak. Yeah, you can definitely have a good career with only freelancing. There's other difficulties there. Like, my pattern with freelancing is I tend to significantly undercharge for, like, I don't know, it's very difficult because the amount of money that I could make if I went back to Seattle and just got a standard tech job at Amazon or another at Microsoft or Google or something, assuming that I could get a job at one of those places. But my students got jobs there and they feel like I'm much smarter than they are, so, or within the realm of programming. So I need to just sort of work on the assumption that maybe my presumption that I wouldn't be good enough to work there is false. Supposing I could, the pay for that can be pretty absurd. Like with my level of experience, it's probably, minimum of $150,000 in the Seattle area. And I'm charging vastly less than that for the freelancing work that I've done, because I don't necessarily feel it like it's a combination of I'm charging less and it feels like the work is harder. Like it's reverse engineering work usually, so I'm doing this like assembly level analysis of really large programs, and applying detailed knowledge that is not necessarily any random person that knows programming would be able to do this kind of thing. Like there's definitely skills that I think are a little more broadly available. Web development is ultimately more broadly available because it's just like much more accessible to teach it, and a lot more people have started programming learning that kind of thing, whereas most people haven't learned super low level stuff. So in that sense, from a like marketplace standpoint, I should be charging more for doing this kind of work. But I am sort of mentally or whatever, psychologically, find it incredibly difficult to actually charge what would be a realistic price, or what would be comparable to what I would be able to get if I just went and worked at Amazon or something, right? And I mostly justify that to myself from the standpoint of the people that I am doing the work for aren't necessarily people that have a lot of money. Some random person running a MUD, like one of these old text-based online games, like they're not going to be paying me tens of thousands of dollars to work on their thing. Probably. It wouldn't make sense to put that much money into one of those games. So I'm not going to ask them to pay me that much money, but I still probably end up undercharging by quite a bit. Just, it's, it also feels like an easy way to ensure that I actually get work that way. But it's, it ties into the same self-confidence kind of thing that is the issue with applying to jobs. It's like, I don't feel like I am worth, $100 an hour or whatever nonsense would be an appropriate amount for doing a freelancing kind of gig. And so I'm not going to ask that much money. And I am, what am I saying? Yeah. So you can definitely have a good career freelancing, but it goes better if you have that sort of mindset of like, of course I should be charging a pretty significant amount of money to do freelancing work. I know people that do it, and they can do well for themselves through that. So I don't think that's going to be the path for me. I think the little bits that I've done have been helpful in letting me continue this process a little longer. And like the ideal, if I go down that path, would be if I can learn enough about this binary exploitation, vulnerability, and analysis, research, and exploitation development stuff, that I can actually like find 0 days and report them and get bug bounty from that. If there's bug bounties that are paying, thousands of dollars for finding a real 0 day, that would be the ideal, because then I can set my own terms around the working on that stuff, and mostly just be focused on this stuff, which I find really fun. But it just seems I don't feel like I'll be there by the time I have to go back to the US and get a job, because I'll be out of money. So I don't know. That's still several months away at this point. So I'm not worrying too much about it. But just, yeah, I don't know. There's like, I think about this stuff quite a bit rather than actually do anything about it. I guess that's called being anxious. Yeah, so I've certainly played out a lot of possibilities in my mind over the last several months, over the last year and a half. Should I just go back trying to do work in the game industry? I also don't feel very qualified on that because I can tell a story about my experience in the game industry that doesn't paint me in a good light in terms of experience. But that's again like my poor mental processes just trying to be very negative about my experience level. But then at the same time, like there's very few game companies that I think would be respectful of my and the other employees' work-life balance and stuff, and the whole like not have a lot of crunch mode, so to speak. And so since that is important enough to me, I would, have relatively few places to apply to for that. If I don't do good tomorrow, I'll just give up on school and try the other path. I mean, if you are going and trying to get your diploma, like, I don't know, is this a situation where you need to do real well on these tests in order to be able to get the diploma at all? Because if you can like sort of do mediocre or skate by on, just a like certain amount of whatever their minimum bar is and get the diploma, I think that's still worth the effort. It's not like when you get a programming job they're caring so much about the diploma that you have for a high school diploma. I'm assuming high school, but I guess you didn't necessarily specify, and I don't know if that is how it is organized where you're at. But where none of the programming jobs I cared about or applied to rather ever seemed to be concerned with whether or not I had a high school diploma. I think there was a strong assumption that I just did because I'm applying to like a technical, the kind of job that people who don't have a high school diploma probably aren't applying to, social, within the social construct of our society. And certainly, the concern for what that implies or not like isn't a major one. You can get it easily, but you don't want to get a bad grade in math, because I've been like having this thought ever since I started programming. It goes as this: if I don't get a really good grade in math, then I don't have an intelligence or mind for programming, or I don't deserve to become a programmer. Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's not true, but you keep thinking that, and that's like, I wish I had a nice piece of advice for you, but the reality is when your brain is stuck in these mindsets and mental patterns that are incorrect or unhelpful or whatever, but you can't stop yourself from them, like there's not really a thing that another person could tell you to get you out, kickstart you out of that situation. So I mean, obviously, I will tell you, I agree that that is absolutely not true. I am also not good at math. If you want to go back and watch some of my streams where I fail repeatedly with basic arithmetic stuff, like, it doesn't matter. You can do programming just fine without having you can do programming just fine without being good at math, but also the concept of being good at math as it is reflected from school is completely bogus. As we talked about earlier, the whole like kids that are good at following rules, like it's math is the number one spot where people are told that they're intelligent because they're good at following rules. Like, you get a lot of kids who think they're intelligent because they're willing to be a manual, like a human calculator, in more in essence than than in like the fact that they know math, so to speak. So they're willing to memorize a bunch of formulas and then be capable of like by hand going through those formulas in a test scenario. Like, it just simply has no relation to what it means to be good at math, what math usability could be applied in the real world outside of programming, and how it would be applied in programming. Just across the board is pointless, basically. And it's like, I would say the way that I could understand a particular mathematical concept and understand it more than just like, hey, I've memorized an equation or a formula or something, is to have written a piece of code that makes use of that or otherwise implements that idea. And there's not many that I've done that way, for sure, because again, I'm not like that. I don't know. I guess I have a certain amount of math phobia just as a result of the way that stuff worked out with school. And I carry this presumption that I'm like not good at math, even though, as I just said, I know that it's completely based on a bogus understanding of what math is and what it means to be good at it. But like, there's a really good piece of writing that I found called Lockhart's Lament. Is basically a mathematician who's written about how, and he's talking about the United States in particular, but just about how what passes for mathematics education and learning math and being good at math is completely bullshit and has no relation to what math really is, which is a very creative, artistic expression. So in the same way that programming is a very creative thing, mathematics is as well. Now, but at the same time, like, I think there's a nice correspondence there, because mathematics could be seen through this lens of essentially being a human calculator and going through these rote, mechanical implementation of existing mathematical concepts without really applying or considering the idea of how did these mathematical concepts come to be, which is the essence of math and depends on a creative process and a curious mindset and stuff, and the sort of thing that is completely divorced or removed from mathematics education and is not selected. Like, the people that have that are usually not the people that are seen to be good at math from the school system's point of view, because maybe their creativity pushes them to not be so interested in doing this very like follow the rules and just, oh, let me plug in numbers into a formula so that I can show my work and get a particular answer, and that's how math works. So in the same way, you could do programming in this very vulgar way of like, well, if you only learn like, you could go through programming education and probably I might be able to find stuff like that in the free bootcamp education, where it's like, okay, we're going to do a to-do list program, and we start by structuring, like, we write our code and we name, like, we always use a formula of how we structure our code and how we write any given application. It always, starts with a function like that does X, and then we follow with a function that does Y, and we are just filling in a few details here and there, and that's how we do programming. So, I mean, I'm being very vague here, but basically, you could create this paint by numbers, and that's the like metaphor that the Paul Lockhart guy uses a lot. This idea of paint by numbers, of like, well, you've already got a drawing, and you're just going to fill in the colors as you, not even as you wish, but as you have been directed, basically, in order to then arrive at a result that looks like what somebody else had already created. You could do the equivalent of that in programming, but that is not exercising your creativity, and that's not what the essence of programming is about. And one of the things with programming is that it's like there's actually not that many jobs for programming where that would be acceptable, basically, because of the way programming works, right? We can automate stuff. So if a thing is so standardized as to be paint by numbers, you could automate that thing and then reduce it down to the piece that is the only creative part of that. Maybe selecting which pieces to fill in where. And then you can write a macro to do it, or you could write a language that allows you to generate all of that code, basically, right? We have code generators all the time in our projects, because those are scenarios that have a very predefined structure. So if I don't have React, right? But if you do like create React app, then you're going to get, it's just going to generate a bunch of code for you. Actually, these days they realize that generating the code and having a bunch of files that a new person doesn't have any clue what they're doing, what those files' purposes are, is just more confusing than helpful. So now they hide it, but it's technically all there, and they just generated, they just like, the program just, I'm trying to say it in a nice way, but I guess I don't care. The program just shits out a lot of code. And I look at it, that's the terminology I use in my head, because the computer is not a very good programmer, but if you generate a bunch of code, now you're responsible for that code, and understanding it, even if, you didn't write it yourself, which is why I'm not a huge fan of the generate code style, but that's a whole separate thing. But that's because a React application, and a very standardized one, or your average one, is a very standardized structure to a React application. And so that can be very helpful for learning purposes. So I don't want to badmouth it completely, because like we absolutely when we taught React at the bootcamp, we definitely used Create React App for everything, because it is a good way, like you want to learn with a structure, but then you need to get past the structure eventually. And that may be years from now. But as you progress, you start to realize what pieces are the structure and what pieces are the fundamentals of programming. And then you can set aside that structure and start to play around. And that's where, you're still working creatively within the structure in the first place, but you can begin to become creative enough to not even need the structure. And I think if you relate that to music and stuff, it's like the like jazz or something, right? Is like it, or when they, maybe if you like watch videos where they talk about artists and stuff, and they're like, oh, they broke the rules and stuff, but it's like they talk about how they're able to break the rules because they understand the rules so well that they know what is impactful to break. They're not just doing random stuff. And so you can get to that same point in programming where you realize what the, so to speak, rules are of how to make a React app, what the concrete, every single time kind of structure is. But then you realize, okay, well, that structure is just built out of a set of these pieces that somebody else has designed to go together, and I can take those pieces and design it to do something else if I want. And so then you don't need Create React App. You can just start from those pieces and go, because it might be simpler to do that than to start from somebody else's structure, the Create React App structure, and take pieces away or reassemble them or whatever. That might be a little more messy to get to where you want. But so my point is, like, if you only ever learn Create React App, And not even that, but like a less creative way to even use Create React App. It's just like follow a tutorial point by point by point and never do your own modifications to that tutorial or your own like experiment, like, well, what if I did X, what if I did Y, and see what happens. Then you can arrive at a much more I guess I was called it like vulgar before, like just a worse conception of what programming is, which I think is the conception that a lot of folks who don't do programming have for what it is. They have this conception that it's like, oh, it's just like a lot of like math, and like you just follow a set of like, okay, we need to do X, so I could look it up in the book and it says when you need to do X, you just type in Y, but it's not that at all, right? It requires a core of a creative process, because there's no when X happens you do Y set of rules. It's too broad and it's too full of various, like there's just an infinite possibility space for how you could write a program. And so I guess that's like, I don't know if you've learned enough about programming to have heard about this, but there's this idea of Turing completeness in a language. I guess I should have typed Turing completeness. But it's this idea that like if your language, whatever it is, and it can apply to the low-level machine language of a CPU all the way up to PHP, JavaScript, any language that you can write, if it has these small set of things, which is, maybe like, I don't know what they are actually, because I don't have that great of a computer science education either, but it's like, if you have like if statements and loops and some other like very core elements that every language you've ever worked in does have, then that language can be used to write any program. And any of the languages that have those things can be used to write any program that any of the other languages could write. They wouldn't necessarily all be good programs, from various perspectives of what good means, but they could be equivalent in terms of their functionality and their behavior. And so a thing that sort of falls out of this is basically there's an infinite number of programs that have the exact same behavior as the program that you want to create. You could create your React application in PowerPoint, because PowerPoint technically has the mechanisms necessary to be Turing complete. It would be the most god-awful way to implement a React application. Like you'd also have to implement a browser and stuff through it, but maybe not even a full browser, because you could probably emulate it in terms of the stuff that PowerPoint already has for its graphics and all that. But a lot of the like HTML and all that, you'd have to like implement pieces of the web browser in it, and it would require so much memory and be so slow that it would never run on a real world computer, but it's physically, technically possible. And so given the fact that you have that infinite amount of space in which to implement your program, you can choose whatever language you want, pretty much. There's definitely categories of languages where they aren't actually that capable, but any of the ones that we generally think of as programming languages do have that capability. So you can choose any language, and you can choose any way you want to write it, because within each language there's also an infinite number of implementations of a given program that do the exact same thing. And so because the space of what you could do is infinite, that means that it is by definition a creative art, because the creativity is you deciding which implementation you want to do. And you have all these concerns for what that is. Maybe it needs to be fast, maybe it needs to be short enough to be able to read by a human and be understandable. Maybe you like to structure stuff a certain way because you have these concerns about changing the code later to make it do a different thing. There's a lot of various aspects that come into it. But all of those are fundamentally creative and are built based on whatever that, I don't know, unknowable underlying creative impulse is. Oh yeah, no worries, dude. I'm just rambling basically. So the whole point of this was just like, if you can see the creativity that comes into programming, when it comes to like, you have to make choices for how to write a program, and those choices aren't, there's no book that will define for you exactly how to make the choices. Like if you're in situation X, you always do Y. There's no set of rules like that. There's more guidelines basically, and you can follow them or not. If you can see how that makes programming a creative thing, then just know that that is also just as true about mathematics and the version of mathematics that gets taught in school and that you may feel like you don't relate to or don't do well with, or just aren't going to do well on this test with, is simply it's a false version of mathematics. It's as false as if somebody did a test for programming and said, well, when you need to how do you handle somebody clicking on a button in a React app? And the answer is like, oh, you write a function on your component and pass that function to the bit of JSX that as an attribute or something to the button component. Yes and no, but there's a million ways to do that basically. And there's other ways that you could achieve handling a button click. And so like making a test like that where it's just like there's a definitive one answer to how to do one particular thing in programming is as nonsensical as the mathematics tests, even though technically, like in mathematics, they are asking you to solve a particular equation or whatever and get a particular answer. In that way, like, yes, there is a definitive answer solution to a particular equation, but the fact that you're focusing on that structure is so besides the point, basically. It's missing everything about what mathematics is by making it that. In the same way that if you asked very like specific questions around programming, you would also be missing what programming is about. So yeah, I think React is a good thing to learn. If you're going down the JavaScript route, it's very popular. And so especially from a like getting a job kind of standpoint, lots of places are looking for React experience at these days. And I think it's it's one of these like, I have good and bad feelings about it. And the things that I like about it were not things that any of my students really understood about it when they were learning it, I would say. They just didn't have the breadth of experience to be able to appreciate what I thought was nice and elegant about it, which made me a little bit sad, but it's just the reality of like they need to see more ways of structuring code and ways of, and different sort of language. I mean, I guess you could say other languages, but JavaScript is not a like it's not a language focused on immutable data, even though React is, broadly speaking, a framework that, if not focused around immutable data, certainly benefits from you designing your stuff to be as immutable and as side effect free and like pure function oriented as possible. But they didn't have any of the like experience to even understand what those concepts would mean, I would say. Like we taught it, but they didn't really understand like enough context to be able to get why a pure function was a good thing, basically. And I think that on some level, you just have to have seen the difficulties that come with not writing code in that way in order to appreciate the benefit of writing code that way. So what I would say is React is definitely a good thing to learn, just from the standpoint of like, getting a job, and it's, it can be a fun thing. Like it can just be fun to make stuff in it as well. Like it has its own inherent benefits to learning it, but also the things, this is what I was trying to get at, I guess. The things that I thought made it elegant and the stuff that I couldn't convey to my students was also stuff that made it harder for them to understand it, because it was a different style from all the stuff that we had been doing with Ruby, for example. So now like the way that things connect to each other and the way that the data flows through the application and pieces relate to each other was very different from how stuff works in Rails, for example, which is Ruby on Rails is what we were teaching before in our curriculum. And so just be prepared for, like, it might be a bit of a mind shift kind of situation to get into React if you've just been doing like standard JavaScript, whatever your pre-React JavaScript experience is. React has a very particular way of doing things, and it may not be a way that lines up very well with what you've already done. But keep at it, basically. And I think getting to that sort of state of zen or enlightenment around how React works and why it works the way that it does will be beneficial. Because there are other frameworks and other scenarios that also take this style. It's called React because, in part because it's like relates to reactive programming. Pretty sure. Well, maybe not. I don't know. It's not even mentioned on here, but yeah, reactive programming, broadly speaking, it's in a I don't know, a pathway. It has a historical connection to that, perhaps, let's say, and that is, maybe that's just my maybe I came up with that connection in my head and it's not truly the case. But I would say, like, the functional reactive programming paradigm, which is a subset of reactive programming, is a very good way to understand and write React. This is a different React. but it is not technically an FRP system, and probably because it doesn't need it. It's a very, like, purpose-built thing for changing the DOM effectively. Also, how much time do you spend on programming or on the computer a day in general? Oof. Too much time, I guess. At this point, it is most of my day. Sometimes 6 hours. Yeah. I mean, I think I use the computer to an unhealthy degree, let's say. More of my day than I should, in large part because I'm very good at telling myself, oh, I have all these deadlines for the little freelancing projects, and so I need to be working on them as much as possible. But that's just me not managing my time very well. Yeah, if I did some kind of physical exercise, it would be a lot better. The class that I'm doing is technically like a self-defense class, but right now it's all online because of the quarantine issues. I really hope they're, like, open it back up to in the next week or two. It feels like they really gotta let me go back to school, because then there's at least some physical activity, but it's not that much, and I've never been a particularly physically active person, so I don't want to put it on the school. I could go outside on my own for sure, but I don't know. That's the the lifestyle that I have acquired over the years. I would not recommend it to other people. But yeah, I probably spend at least 8 hours most days doing stuff on the computer. Yeah. Okay, so did a lot of chatting. I've been doing a lot of chatting, which is fine, but I'm also like, I want to try to finish this thing, so I'm going to try to, I mean, let's keep talking, but I'm going to try to get back into this sum challenge. I need to remember where we are at with it. Oh, yeah. So we have this thing where we can write 5 numbers, and then the sum of those numbers plus a 6th number will get written to a memory address that is equal to the 6th number itself. So we can easily, like, I'm putting the address of one gadget in there by subtracting from it the address that we want to write to and 4, because there's an additional 4 values, and I'll just write a 1 for those. I could probably just put 0, and maybe that'd be fine, but no, I can't put 0, because 0 means the end of the sequence. So we do need to put something for all 6 of them. But the issue that I ran into at the end of the last stream was I wanted to put one gadget in here, but this is an address that is an offset from the base of libc, and we don't have any kind of leak, so I don't know where libc is. The Cybermentee, hey, how are you doing? I'm doing good today. I did some programming work earlier today, and that ended up working out well. It was actually something related to the functional reactive programming kind of style that I was mentioning a second ago. This it's not like explicitly a functional reactive programming library, but it is about like asynchronous stream based programming design. I guess it's really just like streams that are explicitly pulling and putting values. So it's maybe not reactive in its aesthetic design, but it works, I think, on very similar principles, and it's still about asynchronous programming. It's using this library called aleph for closure. You should make a little community on Discord or whatever app you use, like create a group related to programming or the stream. If y'all would like to do that, I can. I mean, there's only like a very small handful of people that watch my stream, but if that's something that you would like, I'm more than happy to set that up. I haven't used Discord very much, or like, it's rather like I have an account, but I don't have the app open very much. But I guess if I did, if there was a Discord related to my stream, which just feels very weird to say it because it's like I'm not like a personality or whatever. But yeah, if y'all want to like be a a study group or a motivation group, I'm happy to have that going. I can also recommend other Discords that have a lot of folks if that's if you're just not sure of other Discords. But if you want it to be a thing with the folks that watch this stream, I can look into setting that up. Sure. Yeah, so I guess it is like reactive stream stuff, but it's designed to be, as they say, a little more abstract so that it works with all of these different systems. In my case, I'm using it for a TCP server. So you have a stream of binary messages that are coming in as TCP packets, basically, and then those get transformed into some data structure, and then you have stream-based processing of those data structures to figure out what the response is from the server and then send it back. it's neat, but then I had to do like some weird how to phrase it. I just had to do some stuff that was really like breaking my brain about how to integrate it into this structure of stream-based programming, and I was very happy to begin to get to a point where now I understand what I need to do. So I had a good day. That's that's my long way of saying I had a good day, because I always feel a lot better if I actually make progress on the stuff that I'm working on. I think that maybe has an outsized impact on my my mood in any given moment. Is like, oh, am I working on one of these binary exploit challenges and I can't figure it out and I have no ideas, and then I feel bad because it's not necessarily like I just in a bad mood because of that. Or do I figure it out and then I'm in a good mood because it's like, oh, I figured something out. I don't know if that's really like too much impact from that or if that's just normal. Yeah, basically, gotta get the endorphins of like, oh, I solved a thing. Okay. So the concern that I had was I don't know. I can't just jump us to one gadget because I don't know where libc is. So because I don't have a leak for libc, I do have a leak of the binary itself, and so we could jump to a gadget that's within the binary. But that gadget isn't going to be enough to pop a shell, because it's not going to be the one gadget scenario, which is just like, can you jump to a very specific address inside of libc and have the system command just sort of work out by itself and it'll run a shell? As it turns out, I can't do that now. And so, because this is in the stack pivot category under stack pivoting, that gives me the hint that really what I need to look for is a gadget that allows me to move the stack to somewhere where I have written a bunch of ROP gadgets, basically. So we can do, instead of one gadget, we can do the normal ROP chain setup to call system, to do the system syscall with /bin/sh. Of course, that means I need to write all of those ROP gadgets somewhere in memory. So that's a separate concern. I think I can do that pretty easily by just jumping us back to the beginning of main, maybe? Or like, that's actually a good question. Because if we jump back, yeah. So if I overwrite the exit GOT entry with main or some other thing that lets us get back into the bit of code that allows us to do the write, we don't have to write that every single time, because it's just in every time it calls exit, it will get to this situation. It'll loop for us, and then we can use each of those loop entries to write. Each of those times that we loop through, we can use to write another value in somewhere in memory. So I can, with a little bit of work, we can get however, an arbitrary number of writes, and that's good. But there's two concerns that I then have, which is, where should we write to? And two, what is this gadget that we can use to pivot the stack? Because I don't know where the stack is either. There's no stack address leak. So it's going to have to pivot to a value that's already in a register. So like what we did for I can just probably grep, right? Insomniac gadgets, I think. I think we did, or no, we did a pop ESP. No? Oh, RSP probably. Yeah. So I think we used this gadget as our stack pivot gadget in the previous challenge. We popped a value off of the stack, and that's the new stack pointer, so that when we then return, we return to we've basically controlled our stack. So now, assuming that we're popping the address of the beginning of our ROP chain, the execution from here on out will be our ROP chain. The problem with that is we don't like have control over what else would be on the stack, because I can't write to the stack because I don't know where the stack is. So the pop RSP approach won't work because you need to have control over what is at the top of the stack in order to pop it into the RSP register. And we don't have that control. But maybe we could move something into RSP. Maybe a fixed address could be moved into RSP. And if that address happens to be writable, then we can just choose that as our place where we're going to write our ROP chain, basically. So maybe there's some gadgets like this in the binary. Now this is for the previous binary, so I'm going to clear that out, and we're going to do ROP gadget. I'm going to do no jop, I think. So yeah, let's look for. We don't have move RSP. Do we have move ESP? No. Do we have pop ESP? Do we have pop RSP? Oops, not PSP. We have a single pop RSP. So we had a lot more gadgets in the previous one because that was a statically linked binary, so it had a bunch of stuff from libc in there. This one, we can pop something into RSP, but we'll need to be lucky in terms of what stuff will be at the top of the stack when this happens effectively. So what we can do is, I can just search for RSP and see if there's other stuff. Just have adding and subtracting from it. That doesn't help. Anything with ESP? No. We can OR it, but that's the one that sets racks instead of ESP. So, okay. I think in order to control RSP, I guess it's possible that some of these add and subtract ones would be helpful. So we could use this one if the address that is at the top of the stack at the moment that this gets executed is like, if you look at the 8 bytes that are referred to by the RSP register when pop RSP happens, before it has actually done the popping, just like at the beginning of executing this instruction, the 8 bytes that are at the top of the stack, if that has an address that is writable in memory, then we can use this one. Otherwise, if not at the top of the stack, but 8 above the top of the stack, 8 higher, is writable, then we can use this one. Otherwise, I don't think either of these are helpful because it subtracts and then adds. So I don't see why that would, like, that's just going to keep it at the same situation. Oh no, this one isn't helpful either because it's not actually changing where RSP points. So I think we do need pop RSP, and it again is like incredibly dependent on whether or not the value that's at the top of the stack when we run that bit of code, and we're going to run it by replacing the exit call, if that is a writable memory address. And I don't think we'll be able to control it, but maybe it just seems like our overwriting is not sufficient to be able to control that area. So we'll put in this address and we'll see what it looks like in GDB basically. If you created a backdoor in C++ or Python or C, would it work with Metasploit? Well, what would it be a backdoor in? I think that's the first question. A backdoor for what program or what piece of code? So if you're going to use Metasploit for, you know, sort of getting control over a target computer or like a Windows VM, there has to be some software that is running on that Windows computer which has a vulnerability that can then be exploited through a like essentially adding an exploit into the Metasploit framework. So if by backdoor you mean like if I wrote a program for Windows that said if you connect on this port then we'll give you a shell, then yeah, you could write a Metasploit bit of Ruby, I think it usually is, that will connect to the machine on that port, and then you have the shell. So that would be the equivalent of like a very minimal vulnerability, because it's like there's no real protection. You're not actually exploiting a bug so much as exploiting the feature of the software. I guess that's why it ends up as a backdoor. So yeah, you could definitely do that. I see what you're saying. Yeah. So if you wrote a piece of software that if it was already on the target computer and running would allow you to get in there through Metasploit, then you're good. Yeah, absolutely. And that's, as far as I understand it, that's like how most real world hacking works. Rather than burn some 0-day or something and like find a really, you know, or they happen to have not patched their software. I mean, there's probably lots of places where they just don't have patched versions of various pieces of software in their network, and you maybe can get in through that. But if it's a harder target, or you just don't want to do the like really, you don't want to do the hard mode version of stuff, you can just get them to download and run a program through, which we'll call it like phishing and various other forms of like social engineering stuff. Embedding it in a JPEG or other, like a PDF or something, that gets a little more difficult, because then you really are exploiting a vulnerability in the JPEG parsing software or the PDF reader software. And so then you do need to find a real vulnerability in that software. But if you can get them to just download an executable program and double click it to run the executable, and then click yes on the like pop up about safety concerns about running executables, if they're, and usually people will just click past that pop up anyways, right? So if you like, hey, here's like the program to do a Zoom meeting, and you just send them an executable, and maybe it really does install Zoom or whatever, but it also installs your backdoor. Like, that's how you would be able to get control over their computer much more easily than needing to actually exploit a vulnerability. Yeah. I feel like, have I done that? Not attacked a machine, but I mean like in the particulars of a Zoom or other video conferencing software. I try to remember if I got to a point where somebody was like, somebody sent a binary basically, that is like, here's the one to run to then connect to our video conference. And if I just downloaded and ran it without really putting a lot of thought into it, I guess it's possible. I don't think I've done that on this computer. I think because I do use Zoom to connect to those classes that I was talking about, the self-defense classes. But I think I just installed that from the website. But it would be fun to reverse engineer it. Yeah, it could. I mean, I don't really have a good setup for malware. And to be honest, somebody had sent me a thing that was like a challenge, and then it seemed to be real weird for a minute, and I got myself very paranoid and fearful that I had allowed them to just send me a program, and I was running inside of the VM, but if they knew that because they were watching the stream or whatever, and they wanted to send me a program to hack my computer, they could definitely do one that was able to escape the VM, I assume. So I don't know, I got real paranoid about it, and I tried to reverse engineer it on a different computer just to like double check that I was being more paranoid than realistic about my fears. And I didn't find anything, but also, I don't know, the fact that I didn't find anything doesn't mean that there wasn't something in there. Can you even do what? Oh yeah, I mean, if there's a vulnerability in the virtual machine hardware, or not the virtual machine hardware, but the software that runs the virtual machine, then you can escape the virtual machine. That's definitely a whole category of bugs that are like, you can go find like VMware escape bug exploit, virtual machine escape, and like here's a version, like these bugs were in 2017, but they definitely come up, right? They're not super common, but if you aren't running the latest version of whatever, then or you haven't gotten the security patches, you might be vulnerable to it. But yeah, there are bugs in that software, and then if you're real good at what you're doing, you can figure out how to trigger those bugs in a way to then get an RCE on the host machine. Generally speaking, they pay pretty well for getting these bugs, because obviously that's a serious security concern, given how much people use virtual machine software in the cloud and all of that these days. But they are, it's not even like you need to be in a. I can't get behind the idea of like propping up Kevin Mitnick as this like super hacker. He's definitely not. But you don't need to be a super hacker necessarily to do it. It's definitely a very advanced kind of hack, but there are people out there that do it and just know how to do stuff. Yeah, Pwn to Own has a category for this, and I would say, every year there's probably at least one entry in the Pwn to Own contest that is somebody getting one of these bugs in VMware or VirtualBox or whatever. So it's real. And Terry Davis, the guy that made the Temple OS, is that who that is? Yeah. I mean, I know of him. He's passed away, I think. Rest in peace. But I didn't ever like check out Temple OS or anything. He seemed like a let's say an interesting guy. I'm not, I think he was a fairly religious kind of guy, if I recall correctly. And the time that he spent working on that operating system is a very impressive. I'm always kind of impressed with people that are like so deep into their own thing, and just make this amazing amount of like progress on a thing that almost nobody else. I don't think anybody cares about Temple OS outside of the social context of like it being created by this one person and having so much of his personality and mindset and all that in it, as a creative work, right? It's like that Temple OS is one of the most obvious examples of why programming is an art form, because that is a single vision kind of piece of art, and it's a huge one. It's like some painter working on the largest mural in the world that's super detailed for their entire life or whatever, right? So it's definitely interesting from that standpoint, but it's also interesting to me just because it's a thing that like I don't think anybody else in the world would be interested in running it for their own purposes, just to have it as their operating system. It only interests people within the context of why it was developed and who developed it and all that. But the idea of being the person that is spending all that time working on a thing that nobody else is going to want to use or benefit from is also an interesting thing to me. Just because it's like, yeah, man, just do the thing, because that's what you want. I don't know. But at the same time, I haven't actually looked into it very much. I've just sort of like, seen stuff around, sort of like secondhand, gotten an understanding of it. I haven't taken the time to really look into it. Where was I at? Yeah, we went to attach. It died. I got the alarm. Okay. Oh, because we got the seg fault, of course. I didn't put a breakpoint on there. There's going to be a call to exit, probably after this return. Why do we get the exit? We're getting a. Okay, let's look at. There's this exit call, so maybe it's on this one. And what was the address? 4000 A3D. Maybe we were there. Do you know any good library in C or C++ or even Python to use, like capture a keystroke on Linux? I am trying to make my Vim compile and execute C or C++ code when I press F5. So if you want to do that with Vim, I mean, I would assume that Vim has, well, I know that it has like a key sort of, like API, right? For like, okay, when you press this shortcut, leader mode key and K or something, right? So you can set up your n no remap or whatever the names of the functions are. They're always awful names in Vim script. But there's ways of setting it up like that. But maybe there's a way to do the function keys as well. I've never looked into that. Vim bind a function key, or map, I guess is their terminology. Did you look around and see if there were? Yeah, you can say map the F5 key. So I would say do that, and then there's a way to tell it a command to say run a program, basically. I don't remember enough about Vim script to be able to tell you off the top of my head how you get it to run. I guess it's like this, exe for exec command, like on the shell. So you could definitely go for it that way. Yeah, cool. There you go. There's you don't have to do anything outside of Vim for that because it's designed to do that. So that's awesome. Okay. Where are we at? No, why are we... Where are we hitting this return situation? Why are we getting to an exit? Alright, well, we'll just start at the beginning of main, I guess. Oh, maybe it's this exit. Okay, let's look for that one. Didn't see that exit before. 164. Right. Yep. Okay. There we go. Okay. So what now? Why is that address? Oh, because I did NI. Ugh. Okay. All right. So we're jumping to the PLT stub, and then that pops us to the address that we want to be at. Now, what gets popped into RSP? RSP has this address, 4009 AC. What is at yeah, so that's just the address in main. Not helpful because we can't write to that. We need something in 6001 to 6002, or 602,000 to 601,000 to 602,000 hex. Okay. What is there to be done? I need to control what is in the stack pointer. Can we... Let's see. because there is a version of pop that would pop all of the registers. What about leave? We do have a leave. Interesting. And RBP is a stack address that we don't know. Oh, but it was also, I guess it would pop from where RBP points. No, it would put this into RSP. Okay, so that doesn't help us either. We need to get RSI. No, also RSI is not a good address for us. So let's try it again. Should have left. Set that breakpoint. That's the right one. Okay, so we step again. Does it matter that we stepped again? Probably not. So I don't see definitely having trouble understanding what kind of gadget we could use to control the stack pointer. Right, if we step one at a time, and then, yeah, let's just move EAX 0. That's like mostly zeros or something. I don't know. Yeah, not a valid address at all. Not one that's been mapped in, at least. So the only writable sections are this one that I don't know where that came from, but it looks like it's probably not mapped at the same address every time. This one as well. These are probably connected to these binaries, but just aren't explicitly listed as being from that binary because maybe not the BSS section or something. I don't know, but they are most likely just based on the addresses, based on the same sort of location. Although this one is significantly different from some of these other ones, but it just like, it's probably going to be random each time, right? It's probably going to be randomly laid out. Stack is also going to be random each time. This is the section that we know that we can write to. So that's what we need to get into our stack pointer. But how to get that into the stack pointer? Could we LEA something? No, we just have the leave. What? Okay, yeah, we don't have many gadgets in this thing. Is that really... the beginning? We don't have anything before here? That seems unlikely. Maybe it's just... oh, I see, right, it's not sorted like that, but... not seeing anything at particularly low addresses, even though those are technically executable. Maybe I'm not using ROP gadget properly. I guess that, like... yeah, I still don't know what I would do. Depth for search engine, huh? I mean, maybe we need to do JOP or something? Oh. Okay, we have some more. It's certainly... so if we run the gadget... yeah, let's worry about that later. We just have call RSP. That's interesting. Yeah. So you can say range, is it 40,000? We get any earlier ones than we used to have? Doesn't look like it. Which again is so weird. I don't know why it doesn't find anything before like 500 something. How do we get something into RSP? What does that entail? I mean, maybe there's something different from how I'm thinking about it. And it's not about getting some kind of stack pivot gadget, but I mean, we're in the stack pivot section, so it feels like that's the thing to try to do. I guess it could be that that's not a good function to try to use, not the exit function. So I think we were getting to this exit. Yeah. I guess because we didn't do 5 for the sum, we did 6. So I guess the exit is the thing that we have to make use of. But then what do we write to it? I don't know. Look for something with a longer depth, or maybe, but I don't think this is going to get me anything that I didn't already see. Just more varieties. I mean, I guess it would be nice to see what was before this. Maybe that's what I need to do, is just say dash all. Right, because if we look for I don't understand why it wouldn't find instructions that come before this pop. I guess we can look at look at this address. Okay, what if we look at C and B and so that, I guess that's what how it works out. There is no means of it's only if you start at this address that it looks like a pop RSP. Yeah, I don't know what we should be jumping to, so I'm gonna look at the walkthrough. Oh. Okay. So you can do a relatively small ROP chain. So what they're saying is if you come down to the printf call, what you have on the stack at that time is the values that have been written by us onto the stack, and that is true. Although I don't know what this one is about. But otherwise, these 4 ones, and this is, I believe, the address. Yeah, this is the GOT address. So what they're saying is if, so when we do the call, it's going to push one value onto the stack, the return address. If we then pop that into a register, then we should be controlling the remaining stuff. So at least for the next 4 or 5 entries on the stack. Oops. I don't quite understand why this value is in the top one. Oh, because this is what we need for the value to sum properly with all of these to the thing that we want, because it's actually smaller than that. So that's fine, because we're not actually caring about where we write to on that last iteration. Instead, we can do 5, because we do need a 0 for the last one, or we can do 4, I guess, and a 0. Try that out. So if we run sum and we say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0, that still fails. But if we do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 0, that'll succeed. So we want it to not go down the exit path, but instead the correct one. So that allows us to write 4 entries in a ROP chain, basically, after we've written a ROP chain somewhere else. And that ROP chain has to leak to us a libc address. And then, wait, can we leak something from this ROP chain. So we can do a printf call. We get %star. Why does that break it? What does it look like after this byte? Find Alright, so we need to find from this through this. Why didn't it like that? Oh, we just need a comma. Okay. Gotta run it again. I guess we could provide that. Okay, so if we put %p into one of our entries, and then maybe we can pop EDI. We can pop RDI, but I don't really want. Oh, and no, because I can't just. How do we get a leak? need to So we've got like, I think 3 gadgets that we can work with, because the last gadget needs to return back to main. The other ones, we want to presumably do a printf call. Well, oh, maybe we could do the GOT thing. Yeah. Okay, okay. I've done that in previous ones, so we can use puts instead of printf. Don't care about that then. The can we use puts? I guess so. Assuming there aren't any null bytes in the address, which is a decent guess. Hopefully we'll be lucky on that. Then I think what we do is we put it entry that has the address of puts, let's say, doesn't really matter. Then we, just before that, put a gadget that pops that into RDI, and then we put a gadget that calls puts, and then puts will print out the 8 bytes, or it'll print out however many bytes up to the first null byte, starting at the location of the GOT entry for puts, which should have, by this time, the actual libc address. So we can do that. So first we need to overwrite exit to get us back to main. And then the next one we can overwrite printf. And then we can do the actual printf leak, and then we can use that to overwrite exit with the 1 gadget. Let's give it a shot. gonna call it overwrite. Yeah. Value minus address. Cool. So then we need to say overwrite exit GOT with main adder. See if that works how I think it works. Cool. Then in the printf GOT we need to overwrite with a gadget that pops somewhere. I don't think we need to care what we are popping into. But we will use that again later, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, so then now we need to Okay, then we can say set input of pop RDI and you can just do printf GOT. Can we just do printf? I think so. It's probably better to do puts though. If only because puts is not going to attempt to interpret any of those bytes as format string format specifiers if they happen to have a byte that is a percent symbol or something. So then we'll do puts GOT and can I do it that way? What's wrong? Two. Okay. Tuple index out of range. One, two, three, four, five, six. Oh. Oh, why do I even need to do it that way? I don't need to asterisk on it either. Okay. So double check that this works. classic fault from that. What would be... there was... So that is a writable section. Oh, but I had put that in. That's the issue. Okay, never mind. That's in there. Yeah. Okay. So then the reason this isn't working is what? Let's check it out in GDB. We want to check the printf call 188. Okay, so I thought what did we write there? Oh, okay, I see. Yeah. It's this value that we want. Okay. So that's a pop RDI. Then we'll return to another pop RDI, so we'll pop in that address. And pop. Oh, we want the PLT. That's the issue. Okay. Can we say send that and then That looks like it might actually be a valid address. Maybe. Oh, it's gonna, since we're doing puts, we can just receive until and we'll receive until the /n, and I think drop equals true. That's correct. Okay. So that one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bytes. Yeah. Okay. I don't know why we were missing. This one is 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there's 4 bytes in nulls, but that seems like a weird. Seems like a very unlikely. But maybe. Sort of. Like, I don't know that I normally would see it not end in 7F. But there you have it. Okay, so then need to do U64 of that plus let's say can we do, yeah, we can multiply, okay. Okay, that seems fine. Go ahead, copy that in. Okay, let's run it, double check that it still calculates something. It seems likely then. Yeah, okay. So now we gotta find one gadget again. Is that? Get a sig fault. Okay. I'm going to try one of these other ones. Nope. Okay. Well, let's see if the thing does what I anticipate it to do. Okay, so we get to the exit call. I think that's first write, then a write of how many times are we going to call exit? This is the first one, the second one. This should also get to exit. I guess what we could do is pause after the did it already. Okay. So why is it in scanf? Because it's back in read ints. We gotta move APS, maybe. What was RBP? RBP should be fine, probably, with that offset. General protection. Is this, it's too large of a value, huh? Well, damn. Right, like, if we just take out libc base. It's still the same? Right to no, we still get that. Okay. Something about coming back to main. But we need to we do need to do another overwrite. Well, let's try adding that breakpoint. Or this should be, yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we have memory there. Is this the thing that was mentioned in Rop Emporium? Move APS. Okay, so we just need to return maybe not to the beginning of main. So this should be exit GOT and libc base plus 1 gadget. I think that still might be too large, but figure it out. So we can maybe skip the push. So just +1. Why did that go to printf? Do I... Should we split it up somehow? kind of need the address to be, yeah, what does the stack look like? Okay, so at this point, this is our what do we get that sigfall there? From the call to the gadget. I see. Okay, so maybe we need to try the other gadget. All right. Oh yeah. Wait, what? It just ended? Just exited normally? Okay. So I think that's because the exec VE call didn't work with the way that it, with this gadget. So maybe we can do that other one, but we just need to deal with a stack alignment issue. Okay. But I guess there's not actually anything we can do at that point. What do we have in RDI? So we are going to call bin/sh in exec VE. So oh, but the issue is the other parameters, right? This is like, we're going to try to do the syscall with the wrong. Then we get back an error message. Okay. just so we get it in the raise. We don't care about that. Maybe we can't do the one gadget. Then can try this one. Nope, also seg faults. Goddamn. So we can write arbitrarily. And we can do a little bit of a ROP chain. So maybe we can write our ROP chain and get gadgets out of libc, and if we get enough gadgets, okay, so we've got like 3 gadgets to work with to set up maybe something that fits these constraints. So we need to just be 16-bit aligned. For this one, and have RCX be null. Let's see. Okay. So RSP is, looks like it's 16-bit aligned. But that stops being the case. But if we, and then what is RCX? RCX is null. So rather than do another exit base thing, we could do a pop whatever. Let's try that then. Send input. Or we could even say like well, I mean, what do you want to understand? This is GDB, so it is very noisy, but basically this is one display frame, and here it's showing me the state of all the registers. Actually, it has a little info thing here. So these are the registers that a 64-bit x86 machine has: racks, RBX, RCX, RDX, etc. And it's telling me what the values are in each of these. It notices that this is a value that's an address on the stack, so then it tells me what is the data at that address on the stack, and then very conveniently it notices that this is an address in the like instruction range, the dot text segment basically, or section I guess. And so it tells me what is the code at that location. It happens to be in the main function plus 169 bytes, and it's a move instruction. So technically RSP points at a memory location that has the address of some instruction in the main function. This is like the return, where this code would return to when it finishes the current function. It'll pop this address off of the stack and then return there. And then this is another register which also happens to have a stack address, but the value at that location is just 0. This one happens to be a writable address, so it shows me the value that's there, and that points at another location in memory which has this value. Like, it's just showing me a lot of details about the state of the program. And then this is actually a little bit of the stack as well, so we can see the stack RSP points at this portion of the stack in memory, and we can see this is the value that's there, happens to be the same as this one, and just above it is this value, or rather just below it in terms of memory addresses. No, sorry, this is just above it in terms of higher value in memory. And then above that, it's got a 1 and a 1 and a 1. And these are the inputs that I actually sent to the program. You can see the 1, 1, 1, 1. Those are the 4 ones here. This value is the address exit GOT. So that ends up, I pass it as the address value for the Python function, but it ends up as the last thing, so that's what ends up here. And then this value, val minus adder minus 4, is this guy. And it's a pretty large value because it is ultimately, oh, maybe it's been overwritten. I'm not sure. No, I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe this is libc base plus 1 gadget, I guess. Minus adder minus 4. And then this is like a readout of the code that's in the current section where we're executing instructions. And it tries to tell us the stack here, but it's a little confused because we're in a weird broken state. So, I mean, obviously it does require a certain amount of knowledge about the way an x86 processor works and how it executes your machine instructions. But if you have if you've used another debugger, if you're on Windows, maybe Cheat Engine is a good one to pick. That's really easy to get into. It's going to show you all the same info. It'll have a readout of the registers, and it'll have an area where you can look at the stack, and it'll have an area where it'll show the instructions that are executing, because these are all necessary pieces of information for doing debugging when you don't have source code. It's just granted, it'll show you this information, but the more that you actually understand about how the CPU works, the more useful the information is. It just takes time learning assembly and stuff to get a feel for what this information means and why it's useful. I don't care about actually writing a ROP chain like that. So we're gonna just do pop RDI, don't care. And what is we want to, because we can pop RDI again. And then we want libc base plus 1 gadget. Damn. So I'm going to step into our gadget. Oh, do I only need to pop once, probably, right? That's my bad. Yep. Or I need a gadget that pops twice. Okay, grep pop gadgets. And I guess I could use libc gadgets, but this seems fine. So we can do this guy instead. Okay. I'm always like prepped for having it work. So am I wrong in how I think about this? We're going to pop that one. It'll bring us to this address. Oh, do we need to put two things? Okay. And then that is returning us to null. Hey, oh, I was close. Nice. Okay, this is a good one. Obviously did need to resort to the walkthrough at one point in order to sort of get the fact that we could actually leak something. I was not thinking about that mechanism, that maybe we had control over what was on the stack sufficiently to use a single gadget to then get ourselves into our own ROP chain. That was the key, basically. So what I was showing earlier when I was trying to explain this situation, it's gonna be way up here and I'm probably gonna not be able to find it, but basically at the point where we call printf, it happened that like these values on the stack are all values that we had supplied. And so when printf gets called, it has one address that is put on the stack by the call instruction. The call instruction is going to push the address for the next instruction it's basically going to push RIP at the moment the call finishes or whatever. So that's what gets pushed here, where we should return to. And then the following, technically only 5 entries are our own, because we need the last one to be 0, otherwise the printf code path doesn't happen. And then if we overwrite the printf call to be a call to a pop instruction, then it will pop this first one, or rather, sorry, it will pop the return address, so we'll get rid of that, and then the pop ret gadget will then return to the first value that we control. So then we can put in another gadget that we want, and we've got a total of 4 gadgets that we can use. In the first case, the last one needs to be, what am I saying? Or we got a total of 4 gadgets we can use. The last one needs to be the main function address so that we loop back so that we can repeat this process. But the other 2 or the other 3 get used to leak the libc base address, basically. We leak an address that's within libc, and then we calculate the base address from that. Then on the next iteration, we do a little ROP chain that sets up the conditions for the one gadget to work. And then the last bit of that ROP chain, rather than going back to main or something, goes to the one gadget, and that runs the shell for us. So yeah, we were able to get enough of a write. We first need to overwrite the exit process so that we can write one 8-byte value anywhere, and we use that to overwrite the GOT entry for exit first so that we can repeat. It's like the infinite wishes. Wow, I didn't think about it that way, but people talk about, well, I say people talk about it like it's like a common topic, but I was watching a comedy special from James Acaster, and he has a little bit where he's going on about the loophole. He loves loopholes and the loophole of infinite wishes and stuff. So he was talking about it. I don't know that it's a common discussion topic, but it's certainly a concept that people know of. This idea of, like, if you are confronted with a genie in the traditional Disney Aladdin scenario, and I don't know how much that actually draws from real, like, Arabian folklore about jinn or whatever, but supposing there's an all-powerful genie that will grant you 3 wishes, then the obvious loophole is for your first wish to be for infinite wishes. So we have a very similar scenario here where we are granted one write to anywhere in memory, and we very carefully pick that write to be a situation that that grants us an infinite number of additional writes, basically. That's what we did on the last challenge as well. It was a different approach that we needed to take to set up the repeatable, you can write as much as you want scenario, but the concept and the goal is exactly the same. Of, we need to be able to loop back to the code that allowed us to do a write, and we want to like have that loop happen as much as we want. So then we can write anywhere as much as we want, and our possibilities become a lot better. And in this case, we use that to then write additionally to control what the printf flow does. And the printf flow does allow us to make use of the stack for ROP gadgets, basically. And now that we have use of the ROP gadget, situation, or that we can like run a couple ROP gadgets, that was enough. So cool. Didn't need to use too much of the walkthrough. It's really just this section, or rather this one. This is because I had worked this part out myself. That we could go back to main and get additional writes, but I didn't know what we wanted to write. And so somebody had said mix reg, I guess, gave the idea to do a stack pivot. When we look at the stack layout, when printf is called exit, we'll also have to do this, yeah. Then you can see these are the values that they chose to write as input to the program. They did 159, 357. So this is 159, this is 357, this is 951, and 753, and then 0. So those are their 5 inputs. If that is the case, then you can, I guess I did look at this section a little bit, and they said you can use a pop RDI ret to basically pop off the return address that the call instruction puts on there. And cool. Then let's see what their exploit looks like, because they got a lot of details of their GDB printout. What do they send this stuff for? Weird. Okay. They just have a slightly different approach to how they write a particular value and address, add an address. Then they do a ROP chain that is, yeah, the GOT entry for puts and the PLT address for puts. I did elf.plt instead of elf.symbols, but the same result. And then, oh, okay, they just go straight to exit rather than, I mean, that's fine as well, I guess. Slightly, you know, there's, as I was saying way earlier in the beginning of the stream, like there's an infinite number of ways to write any given program. Well, this is effectively writing a program. This is programming a weird machine. So there's also kind of an infinite number of ways to achieve that. I wrote the address of main directly into here, but they're writing the address of the exit call, which they've already made the exit call go to main anyways. So it achieves the same result, but one additional kind of indirection there. And then later they do a slightly simpler approach to doing the system call without the use of one gadget, but has the same impact. They actually pop the /bin/sh string into RDI, or rather they pop the address of it. So they calculate the address, put that into RDI by doing the pop, and then they return to the beginning of the system function. So it's just like calling system with the /bin/sh string. So cool. And then I'm trying to like, yeah, I don't know if this is intended to be the exact sequence of stuff that is happening. Probably not. I think it's just generally referring to the idea of doing ROP stuff. So that was a fun one. Obviously took some time to get it working, but you know, that just seems to be the scenario that we're in at this point. My ROP experience is still relatively low, so each one of these seems to have a technique that I hadn't considered, or somehow puts together pieces that I have used before in a way that I haven't considered before, and I'm not yet in the mindset where it's like my creativity of putting those things together myself rather than referring to a walkthrough for some hinting is fully there. So yeah, this was a good stream. I don't know. I'm just sort of rambling at this point because it's been so long and I'm kind of tired. But what we'll be doing tomorrow is more of the x86 instruction decoder. Head back into that. Keep working on. I don't remember where we were at, to be honest. It was on Saturday. It's been a little bit, so I don't remember, but I'll figure it out before the next stream. And then Wednesday, we come back and we'll work on this XCTF 2016 B overflow. What is X16 CTF? XCTF. By Nuss Grey Hats. I don't know. Singapore, looks like. NUS is Singapore. Okay. Cool. Yeah, we'll do this stuff on Wednesday and we'll see if we can get it all done in one stream. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks Linus Didn't Make Linux for all the fun conversation and getting me to talk about personal life stuff, making it maybe a more relatable stream, or maybe just too particular about the details of my life. I don't know. It seemed like you appreciate it at least. So I'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for watching.
When the silence is too loud, I swear I can hear a voice. Left a message in the clouds. They are free to roam above the sea, and their story stays with me like a haunting melody. What do spirits say?